Hello and welcome to the third angle at Teng Fong Sino Group Belt and Road Research Institute, Hong Kong Chuhai College. In the last episode, we discussed anti-China propaganda in the digital terror networks. Today, we are going to discuss the presence of Uyghurs and the Central Asian fighters in the Middle East, and we'll explore their objectives and their activities. Today we have with us a Washington-based researcher and journalist, Umar Farooq. For those who haven't watched him or read him, let me introduce to you. Umar Farooq has decades of experience in covering Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East as a researcher and as a journalist. He worked for Foreign Affairs, Foreign Policy, National Geographic, The Guardian, The Atlantic, The Nation, Reuters, Al Jazeera, Los Angeles Times, The Wall Street Journal, ProPublica, The Daily Beast, Boston Review, Iran, Pulitzer Center, New America, and is Raja Ratnam School of International Relations, and many more like such organizations. Currently, he is working with Bloomberg as an investigative journalist and researcher. Hello and welcome to our show, Farooq.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Farooq, to start with, I'll go for the basic question. How the Central Asian or Uyghur fighters arrived in Syria? What is their background to going to Middle East?
Yeah, so on the map, it's not connected, obviously. So how did they get there? So first, there's Uyghurs that are Chinese nationals, and there's also ethnic Uyghurs from other countries. You know, there's big diasporas in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. The ones that came from China had the most difficult time because for many of them, getting a passport, leaving China was difficult. But what they did is they found ways to smuggle themselves, maybe sometimes by boat, sometimes by very long journeys. You know, some of the leadership, for example, left China and spent a few years going through places like Thailand, Malaysia, Iran, Afghanistan, and Turkey. And in the end, most of them ended up in Turkey when the Syrian civil war had started, and they crossed over from Turkey into Syria. And Syria is where I think almost all the Uyghurs that we're talking about in the Middle East are currently based.
Do they have a specific group or they are part of different groups?
So it makes more sense in Syria to talk about the Uyghur community because there is one big group, the Turkestan Islamic Party, and they have fighters. So they have maybe 4,000 or 5,000 fighters. And there are But besides that, there's maybe 10 or 15,000 other Uyghurs in Syria now. And many of them are women, children, and folks that may not be directly involved in the Turkestan Islamic Party. And that's really, the Turkestan Islamic Party is really the only main group that's left now. There are a few thousand Uyghurs that had joined Islamic State or were living in the areas that Islamic State was in by the time in 2019, by the time that group was defeated on the ground in northeast Syria. And so thousands of them ended up in these detention camps in northeast Syria. And it's not clear whether they still have an affiliation with any group or whether they're just Uyghurs who happen to be in the country.
Farooq, as you mentioned, there were hostilities between Daesh or ISIS and HTS. And we are seeing ISIS expanding its recruitment. So right now, what do you believe that the Uyghur or the Central Asian, who is enjoying the most support of these Central Asian fighters, ISIS or HTS in Syria and in Middle East?
In Syria and the Middle East, definitely it's HTS if there's any group that they're associated with. ISIS in that area, like I said, might have had some families that ended up being put in these detention camps that had some affiliation with that group. But right now, if you ask for any affiliation, the fighters would say that they're affiliated with the Turkestan Islamic Party, which officially last year, a few months after the Syrian transitional government took over and overthrew the Bashar al-Assad regime, officially that group was disbanded and its fighters were officially absorbed into the Syrian army. So definitely in Syria, there isn't the kind of Islamic State connection that you might see in other parts of the world, like in Afghanistan.
Tell me about ISIS has a more global agenda. And this is one factor that it is driving more fighters around the globe into its ranks and files. In the ISIS digital space, don't you see that the HTS objectives or the HTS, what we can say the scope, it is not that much bigger to appeal Central Asian, like we seen in the ISIS. Do you see any future defection from HTS to ISIS? Because HTS is more limited to Syria, while on the other hand, ISIS has more things to offer to Central Asia and Uyghur regarding the Central Asia itself, jihad for Central Asia, jihad for Afghanistan, like we seen in the Taliban case, that now the ISIS, they are exploiting this nationalism, like Islam within the boundaries of Afghanistan. If you see the ISIS propaganda, it's more of a global. So don't you see that edge there in Syria or in Middle East, that it offers more to the Uyghurs and ISIS fighters rather than the HTS?
In the long term, that might be something that happens. I'll say that when you look at Islamic State of Khorasan in Afghanistan, there's been a handful of attacks that have been done that were done by Uyghurs, ethnic Uyghurs. And sometimes ISKP has put out statements alluding to, their motivation being connected to China. And there's been some attacks on Chinese nationals there as well. But in Syria, it's overall the popularity of ISIS in Syria has, greatly diminished, if not completely gone away. It's not the same kind of situation that you might have in Afghanistan. And I think part of that is the external reaction that the world has had to Syria versus the reaction they had to the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. So the Taliban took over Afghanistan, and the global community by and large still decided to not recognize them, to shun them. But you did have some, I think China is one of the countries that is trying to develop projects there. In Syria, we had a very, very quick lifting of sanctions, recognition by international community, opening of embassies, political kind of openings, really a unprecedented kind of support for a group that was at the top of the terror list for many global actors, right? And I think that makes it very difficult for an Uyghur who's in Syria now to be convinced that they should leave this jihadist group that has taken over a country and has some legitimacy, that they should leave that behind and become complete, join this other group like Islamic State. So I think in Syria, that's not going to happen anytime in the short term, even if Islamic State might offer them the international appeal that the Syrian transitional government no longer seems to offer.
Umar, who are the poster boys of the Central Asian in Syria? I mean, do they have a proper leadership, command and control structure there?
So the Turkestan Islamic Party, its leader is a person named Abdulaziz Daoud Hudabardi. And he arrived 2011, 2012 to Syria through that long circuitous journey that I told you that a lot of Uyghurs go through. He spent some time in Afghanistan. He probably linked up with the leadership there of the Turkestan Islamic Party with Abdul Haq Turkestani, and later made his way to Syria. And he's the leader now. When the Assad regime fell, him and a handful of other Uyghur military leaders were given official titles. So he's technically a brigadier general, the equivalent of that in the Syrian army. He actually leads a brigade, and he's one of the few, there's less than a dozen foreign fighters that were made officers in the Syrian army, and he and a few other Uyghurs were among them. So he's seen as kind of the leader of this Turkestan Islamic Party.
Tell me about the funding, the Central Asian and particularly the Uyghur. They have families and they have if they are operating like an army, as you said, who is funding them right now? How they get funding, and what are
Yeah.
their livings? Because you've been in Syria and you have watched them and following them. So, what are the main sources of their funding?
So the difference with them is that they weren't operating clandestinely. They weren't operating necessarily as an outlawed group. And so that allowed them to get funding from a lot of the Uyghur diaspora in places like, especially like Turkey. There's a lot of Uyghurs who live in Turkey who wanted to help their fellow Uyghurs who couldn't find a place to settle. And so they facilitated them going to Syria, and they've helped them over the years to build up schools and to build up businesses in Syria. And it's hard to tell if any foreign funding is a big, part of what they need right now, because the other thing that's happened is these Uyghurs have been there for 14, 15 years. And in places like Idlib, in places like Jisr Shuur, they have gas stations, they have bakeries, they have restaurants, they have schools. So at a micro level, they're probably self-sustaining. They probably still get some charity, some donation from outside, but locally they seem to be self-sustaining.
Uh, there are reports that some of the Central Asian fighters, like in dozens, they are coming back to Afghanistan because they are finding some space over there for their sole objective of jihad. Do you believe or do you think and can confirm that Uyghurs and Central Asian can come or migrate from Syria or Middle East to Afghanistan?
I think it's if they've made the journey to Syria from China, from a place like China, I think it's clearly possible that smuggling networks exist that could take them back to a place like Afghanistan. Um, but there's obviously small numbers of them going. Traveling officially is very difficult. Most of these Uyghurs who were Chinese nationals don't have passports. They're stateless at this point. So it would be very difficult for them to move around. But I think the biggest question is if they're given, if they feel like they have a better life in Syria, why would they get up and move to a country like Afghanistan? And that's kind of the long-term question. If you give them the environment to stay there, would they move somewhere else?
How can you see the presence of Uyghurs or other Central Asian, like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan fighters in the Middle East, a threat to the BRI, which is a flagship program of the Chinese government? And like we see in terms of CPEC and a recent attack in Tajikistan and in Afghanistan, in Kabul and in Badakhshan, do you see a threat to those BRI projects or CPEC project in future from these Uyghurs and Central Asian fighters in the Middle East?
If there are projects in the Middle East, I would expect that there would be some kind of effort, maybe not at an organizational level by a group like the TIP, but at an individual level. Just because the TIP openly says that this is their objective is long term to go back and liberate this part of China, to fight against the Chinese Communist Party. And a lot of them saw the Bashar al-Assad regime as a very parallel thing to what they thought was happening in China. So they don't say that they're going to, give up this idea in the long term. If China starts developing projects in a place like Syria, it could very well be that they come under attack. The only tangentially related thing was that certainly after the Bashar al-Assad regime fell, there were some people that went and tried to attack the Chinese embassy in Damascus. They were stopped by HTS fighters. But after that, we haven't seen any open effort to do something there. And maybe it's a sign that HTS is very good at controlling the Uyghurs within their ranks. But I don't know, long term, I would certainly think that the motivation is there.
Thank you so much, Omar, for being on our show with such insight and sharing your own experiences. And thank you, viewers, for watching us. We will bring you more on such topics. Keep watching this platform. Till then, goodbye and good luck.